It's hard to surprise police officers who work with the most egregious criminal elements, but sometimes meanness and cynicism cross all allowed limits. This happened once in the careers of New York City Police Department officers who had been on the job for more than 20 years, fighting the underworld. It was a case of staggering ingenuity. They had never encountered anything like it before. On September 2, 2016, police received a call from the victim, a 35-year-old woman, who reported that she had been robbed. Police officers arrived at her home. Olga Tsvik, an immigrant from Ukraine who works as a beauty therapist, reported that several valuable items were missing from her bedroom. She told the arriving patrol officers that she had just been to the hospital because she felt very ill. She was suffering from severe dizziness and nausea. The woman periodically lost consciousness, even returning from the medical facility. She seemed a little out of it. Finding out the circumstances of the incident, the police interviewed the victim in detail. From the last unpleasant encounters, she recalled a client who came to her house and demanded to carry out urgent eyelash extensions. Her name was Viktoria Nasyrova. Viktoria had been to the salon before and increasingly acted brazenly, as if she and Olga were friends. She was always imposing, but on that day she was particularly insistent. The master replied that she did such work only in the salon and did not accept clients at home. However, it was useless to explain to her, and Viktoria did not give in, so I had to agree to accept her at home. After a while, the victim also told the police that she refused to hang out together, which was persistently offered by her previously unsuccessful friend. There was one more interesting detail. Viktoria was very similar to Olga Tsvik in appearance, and this similarity always confused the beauty master. As it turned out during the interview, Viktoria appeared on the threshold of Olga's apartment with 3 pieces of cheesecake from the best local pastry shop. Viktoria ate 2 slices with gusto, and insisted that Olga take the third. After a brief tea with cheesecakes, Olga felt sick when Viktoria had already left. She felt violently nauseous moreover. She lost consciousness and was unconscious for about 30 minutes. When Olga woke up, she called 911 and was hospitalized by ambulance. However, nothing could be found in the blood. After returning home, the woman noticed that several valuable items were missing and went to the police to report the theft. But the police initially did not believe in the victim's story and suspected that Olga was under the influence of illegal substances, and she imagined everything. She behaved strangely, was lethargic, and generally looked bad. Detectives decided that the whole story about a female doppelganger was a fabrication. However, Olga denied taking substances and defended her point of view very convincingly. The woman was sure that it was because of a piece of cheesecake she had eaten, and she might have been poisoned. Officers conducted a cursory inspection of the scene and found a box from a local bakery in a trash can. The victim confirmed that it was the same box that contained a cheesecake from a failed friend. Officers took it into evidence as it had baking residue on it. Analysis could have revealed whether the treat was the cause of Olga's problems, but forensics found nothing suspicious about it. The woman still claimed that the cheesecake was the cause of her condition. She referred to the fact that she went to the hospital and to the doctors who checked her body when she was hospitalized, but they found nothing. Law enforcement officers then called the medical facility in response to an inquiry about the patient's condition and tests. The doctors refused to provide the information, which was consistent with the confidentiality policy. However, police officers took this as another reason not to believe the victim. It was not possible to find the client Olga had told them about, so the case was postponed until new details of the incident came to light. These details were told by a neighbor, who the very next day noticed a suspicious woman at Olga's apartment. This woman came and went several times, hanging around the beauty master's apartment, until she came face to face with her neighbor. The strange woman said that her friend Olga was sick and hurriedly left the house. The neighbor saw that the door to Olga's apartment was open and looked in to check on her. It was unbearably stuffy in the victim's apartment. The heating was on full blast, despite the 30-degree summer heat. Olga was alive, but she was unconscious. She was lying on her bed, but she was wearing an unusual combination of clothes, revealing underwear and warm sports pants. When the detectives heard about this, they had the feeling that someone was deliberately trying to change the victim's clothes. Scattered around Olga were pills containing a powerful drug. It looked as if Olga had taken the pills with the intention of taking her own life. A neighbor immediately notified 911, describing the strange woman as dark-haired, attractive-looking, and very similar to Olga. After learning new details, investigators became convinced that the doppelganger woman was not a figment of Olga's imagination. Then the detectives took up the case more actively. Everything they saw in the apartment seemed to be a description of a crime scene they wanted to frame as a voluntary demise. Detectives believed that the persistent cheesecake customer named Viktoria Nasyrova was involved. The police began searching for Viktoria, but they had no leads, no information about who she was or her photograph. Later, however, the department was approached by a private detective, a former police officer who had long been following the con artist's violent activities. He had already tracked Viktoria online, where she advertised escort services on a dating site and through social media. The private investigator believed that the woman used online promotion to find victims for her crimes, and the scheme worked perfectly. Viktoria would arrive at the home of the next client, then she would drug the person with psychoactive substances so that they would lose consciousness. After that, she would take everything of value and then go into hiding. This activity could have been concealed indefinitely, if not for this tragic circumstance. Meanwhile, Olga Tsvik finally recovered from the unpleasant events. Then, having discharged from the hospital, she shared on her page in social networks the story of poisoning. After that, one of her clients unexpectedly told that she knew a man named Ruben Barakov, who was in a similar story. Ruben was the owner of a dry cleaner, and the man met Viktoria Nasyrova on a Russian dating site about a couple months before Olga's cheesecake poisoning. The new acquaintance invited Ruben to her home and boasted that she was a very good cook. He agreed and came to her place, but as soon as he tasted the dishes, the man lost consciousness. The friend emptied his pockets, took expensive watches, money, and cards. The man was under the influence of a very strong psychoactive substance and sincerely believes that it almost killed him. Later, when he began to regain consciousness, Viktoria took him to the dry cleaners, gave him to his colleagues and told them that he was drunk, and then left from there. Only then did Ruben realize that he had been robbed. The private investigator assumed the situation was much more serious, and the two victims of the poisoner were very lucky. In 2017, he worked with a client from Russia to help track down an elusive criminal. Nadia Ford turned to the private detective after the disappearance of her own mother, Alla Alexeyenko. The girl herself lived in New York, USA, but was born in Russia. Nadia was originally from Krasnodar. Her mother, Alla Alexeyenko, single-handedly brought up her daughter and son, and she had a hard time. She worked 5 jobs to provide for her children. Nadia dreamed of living in the USA since childhood, and her dream came true when the girl came to study in America in 2007. There she met a guy whom she married and took his surname Ford. But the marriage did not work out, and the spouses divorced. Nadia stayed to live in the United States and successfully settled there. She maintained close relations with her mother, who at that time was left alone. Alla sold her house, which was already difficult for her to maintain, and moved to live in an apartment. In early 2013, Nadia's mother had a new neighbor named Viktoria Nasyrova. Viktoria quickly became friends with Nadia's mother, which generally seemed strange because of the big age difference. Alla told Viktoria about her daughter who lived in the US, and Viktoria got the idea to go to the States and meet her neighbor's daughter. Alla organized a meeting, and Viktoria flew to New York in September 2013. There she met Nadia and became close to her. Her mother's friend seemed like a nice and pleasant woman to Nadia. Viktoria actively inquired about staying in the US, and Nadia gave her some advice. However, Viktoria's plan did not work, and she returned to Russia. Nevertheless, she continued to communicate closely with Alla. In the fall of 2014, Viktoria was going to fly to America again and informed Alla about it. She offered her neighbor to pass the gift to her daughter if necessary. The gullible Alla was happy about such an offer, and asked Viktoria to take money in the amount of more than $6,000 in valuable gifts, including 2 expensive mink fur coats. However, Viktoria began to constantly postpone her trip to the US for various reasons, and Alla began to worry whether she would even go there and what would happen to her gifts. The woman even called her daughter and told her about her worries. Nadia calmed her mother down and suggested that she ask for her things back. On October 4, 2014, the happy woman called her daughter and shared her joy. As it turned out, she made up her mind after all and talked to Viktoria, and the latter agreed to return her valuables. However, this did not happen, and soon, Alla disappeared. The woman simply stopped answering the phone, which had never happened before. Alla was always in touch, and they called each other every day. Nadia contacted Viktoria and asked her about her mother. She confirmed that she had seen her, they chatted over tea, and Viktoria left. After that, she never saw Alla again. According to Viktoria, Alla was going somewhere, but she did not know where. Alla's son also tried to contact her and visited her apartment, but her mother was not there, and the woman never answered her calls. A few days later, the son and daughter of the missing woman received several strange text messages from an unknown number, allegedly from her mother. The messages said that there was no need to look for her, she was happy. The text of these messages was not Alla's style, causing the children even more concern. Nadia realized that something had definitely happened to her mother, took a ticket on the nearest flight to Russia, and arrived in Krasnodar to help investigate her mother's disappearance. Nadia first went to her mother's apartment, but it was empty there as well. The valuables that were supposed to be given to Viktoria were also gone. Nadia went to the police with a statement, told about her suspicions about Viktoria, emphasizing that it was a suspicious neighbor who did not give her mother valuables. The police officers were interested in the information and devised a plan. Nadia contacted Viktoria, asked to meet, and they saw each other. During the conversation, Nadia demanded that Viktoria tell her where her mother was. Viktoria became angry, started shouting that Alla was alive, but she did not know where she was, and fled to her apartment. Police officers who heard the conversation decided to visit Viktoria at home. She was able to convince the investigators that she was not involved in the disappearance, and they had no evidence against her. Nadia returned to her mother's apartment and looked around carefully. She noticed that, despite her mother's absence for several days, the apartment was very clean, as if someone had recently cleaned it thoroughly. She also discovered that several valuable items, jewelry, and 50,000 were missing from her mother's house. Nadia decided to report this to the police, but the investigators, who had already communicated with Viktoria, convinced her that her mother had taken the money and jewelry with her on a trip and would soon return. However, the daughter did not believe this, feeling that her mother was in trouble, and it was connected to Viktoria. Nadia began an active search, printing out flyers with her mother's picture and pasting them around the neighborhood. She called all her mother's friends and relatives, but no one knew where she was. Nadia also corresponded with Viktoria, begging her to bring her mother back, and was ready to do anything for that, even offering a good reward, but Viktoria denied everything. Nadia did not give up hope that she would find her mother alive and continued her efforts in the search, regularly visiting the police and checking for news. But so far, there has been no information about her mother's fate. The daughter hired a private detective. The private investigator was able to find out that Viktoria had rented a car from a service on the day Alla disappeared. The detective reviewed the information on that car and discovered surveillance footage from October 5, 2014. The footage showed the car traveling on a highway outside of town with two people inside. At the wheel, presumably, was Viktoria, and in the front passenger seat was a missing 54-year-old woman, Alla Alexenko. She was sitting motionless. Nadia was sure it was her mother, and this footage gave her new hope. The daughter went to the police with the information she had received. The investigators confirmed that Viktoria had rented the car in question and invited her for questioning. During the interview, Viktoria admitted that she had been driving the rented car that morning on October 5th, but claimed that no one was in the car with her. She was offered to take a polygraph, to which she agreed. However, after the polygraph test, she was released pending final results. The final check revealed that Viktoria had failed the polygraph test, and she became the prime suspect in the case. The police planned to arrest her, but Viktoria took advantage of the moment she was released from the station and took the first flight out of the country without notifying the police. In the meantime, the police actively began searching for the missing woman. Nadia stayed in Russia for another 6 months, actively participating in the investigation of the case. She hoped that her mother was still alive and appealed to Interpol to assist in the search. In the meantime, police officers checked the route of the rental car, which led them to the wooded area of Armavir, Viktoria's hometown. The search for the missing woman began there, and the daughter's hopes for her mother's safe return home were dashed when the police gave her the bad news in April 2015. The charred remains of a person who was about 3 hours away from the missing Alla's residence were found in that wooded area. The daughter was able to identify her mother literally by her teeth, as the rest of her body parts were badly burned and unrecognizable. The cause of death could not be determined. After the identification, the arrest warrant for Viktoria Nasyrova was transferred to Interpol. However, the fleeing suspect could not be found for some time. After her mother's funeral in Krasnodar, Nadia returned back to the United States. For a long time, she could not recover from the loss of her mother and could not work. Then she pulled herself together and promised her mother that she would get justice, and those responsible for her death would be punished. One day, while surfing the internet, Nadia came across a picture of Viktoria Nasyrova on social media. The wanted woman was flaunting her beautiful, rich life while in Mexico. The victim contacted the US police, reporting the whereabouts of the wanted woman, and they took up the investigation. It was at this stage that Nadia hired one of the best private investigators in the US, who was able to investigate the case faster. One of Nadia's wealthy friends paid for the detective's services, which she could not afford at the time, as Nadia had been out of work for several months due to the search for her mother. The private detective scrutinized Viktoria's social media photos that she had posted. He was able to determine from the new photos that the fugitive was already in the United States. In one of the selfies, the sunglasses reflected the dashboard of a car. After checking hundreds, if not thousands of cars, the detective figured out that it was a Chrysler 300. He was also able to determine that the fugitive's most recent photos were taken in Brooklyn's Russian neighborhood of Ship's Head Bay. By checking a database of cars of that make in the area, they were able to narrow down the search and locate the perpetrator. Despite the difficulty of the search, they found her location. The detective was able to find out that she lived with her lover in a complex. In addition, the Chrysler was registered to her new man. Viktoria probably didn't even realize that the case had taken such a turn, and Interpol was looking for her all over the world. So she put her photos on the internet without any fear, not realizing that she could give herself away. The detective was able to identify the suspect's boyfriend and contacted him. It turned out that at that time the boyfriend had already become a victim of Viktoria, who escaped using a familiar poisoning scheme. In addition, she had poisoned his Beagle breed dog, which died. This caused an even greater wave of indignation towards the perpetrator on the part of the public, which became increasingly interested in the investigation of Nasyrova's crime and followed the development of events. On March 20, 2017, 41-year-old Viktoria Nasyrova was finally found and detained. Nadia, the private investigator, and the police were able to breathe a sigh of relief. It was dangerous to leave her at large. There could have been many more victims of her atrocities. Viktoria's apartment was searched, where the investigators found Olga Tisvik's identity card. Here it became clear why exactly she became a victim of a dangerous criminal. The fugitive not only needed money and valuables, but also badly needed a passport, the face on which was very similar to hers. Her temporary visa was about to expire, and someone else's ID would help her avoid returning to Russia, where a trial awaited her. Investigators even speculated that she planned to kill the real passport holder and literally reincarnate herself as her. But her plan didn't work, and Olga survived thanks to the intervention of a neighbor. The container with the remains of the cheesecake was again sent to the laboratory for examination, and this time a more thorough test on a wide range of substances in the baked goods found a prohibited drug. The investigation revealed that in order to carry out her schemes, Viktoria gave all of her victims this drug, which is normally used as a sedative. But Viktoria increased the dosage of the drug to make the victims pass out. Olga was lucky she didn't die after the cheesecake. The high temperature in her apartment was not an accident. The fact is that in the heat, the effect of this drug is significantly increased and can even be fatal, and the perpetrator obviously knew about it. Therefore, she added heating in the house and tried to dress the victim warmer, but did not have time. After being taken into custody, Viktoria Nasyrova denied everything, including her involvement in the disappearance and murder of Nadia's mother. She also denied her involvement in the attempted murder of Olga Tvik and other victims. It turned out that Viktoria was a suspect in the theft of 2 furs back in May 2016, but the case never developed. Later, several other episodes surfaced where she had dabbled in theft, meeting men on the internet, traveling to their homes, spiking the drug, and stealing from them. Most of the men did not go to the police for fear of publicity, and Viktoria got away with it. Due to the pandemic and the lengthy preparation of the case file, the hearing was delayed for about 6 years. The case finally went to trial in January 2023, attracting much media and public attention. Viktoria refused to testify at the trial and remained silent throughout the trial. The trial was forbidden to go into details of Allah's death because the crime was committed in another country. Viktoria's defense rightly emphasized that there was no evidence or testimony that Nasyrova had actually poisoned the cheesecake and forced her to eat it. Olga said that the defendant brought 3 pieces of cheesecake to her apartment and ate 2 of them in front of her, so she ate 1 piece without any fear. The prosecution argued that this was not an accident, and Viktoria had added the drug to only one slice, and knowing which one, thus she ate the other two without fear and deceived Olga. After a lengthy deliberation of the case file, the jury found Viktoria Nasyrova guilty of attempted second-degree murder. Despite the maximum sentence of 25 years in prison under this article, the judge reduced the punishment to 21 years. However, according to the law, she will be able to request parole after 15 years in prison. For the poisoner, the hardship began during her 6-year wait for trial. There was no trace of the formerly beautiful and chic woman. Her rich life collapsed in an instant. Prison life proved to be very harsh. In detention, she constantly complained of poor nutrition and lack of proper treatment. An assault in prison left her scarred and nearly blind. Nasyrova sued the prison, alleging negligence on the part of the wardens who failed to help her. The dispute was settled by paying her $325,000. In one of the interviews she gave right in prison, Viktoria denied her guilt in all the crimes, including Alla's murder. She claimed that she had nothing to do with the cheesecake poisoning of Olga's beautician. Viktoria claimed that she had eaten that cheesecake herself, and she was fine. She simply shared a piece with Olga, but did not force her to eat it. After serving time in a United States prison, she will be deported to Russia, where she will face a trial for Alla's murder. Her daughter Nadia is very happy that Viktoria is in prison and will no longer be able to escape punishment. Share your opinion in the comments, and also put likes if this story seemed interesting to you. But also do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. See you soon.